Hello and welcome. Over the span of my career, I've been able to gather information that I feel might be helpful to you and has definitely been helpful to me in my playing. Working in the recording studio and working in live performance has helped me to find new roads, fresh ideas, and different approaches to pretty much generally the same basic rudimental functions and playing concepts. I've been very honored that many of the musicians whom are my peers and even some from who are older than I am have chosen to adopt some of my techniques to what we now see and hear in the music field right now in the drum set. One of the things that's really, really beautiful about playing the drums is that I have the best seat in the house. By that I mean that when I sit down, I should be relaxed. I should be able to play and hear everybody in the proper perspective. I should not have any tension in my body. I should be able to let the music flow from me. And this starts with my disciplining myself so that I can sit down, have no tension up here, which is something that I need to do so that I can move and be very, very fluid in my movements in the way that I play. Many drummers, I've observed, have a tendency to sit down at the drum set and take on a style. Some sit down like this, some play up here, just to look a certain way. And what they don't realize is that they're actually hurting themselves physically, weakening their lower back, sometimes because they may sit too low, or sit too high, and having to lean and extend themselves in a way that's unorthodox and uncomfortable and unnatural for their body. So it's important that when you sit down to play the drums, that you play from a standpoint where you feel comfortable in that you're sitting in the correct way, that you feel secure in what you're doing, that you're wearing the correct clothing for you, the correct shoes for you, whatever it takes so that you can get the optimum effect out of what you have to work with. Good luck. Okay, the object of all of that was to give you an indication of what can be done in terms of stick handling, controlling the sticks, making the sticks more a part of your body than making your body a part of the sticks. I like to believe that I can control the sticks. By this I mean how I hold the sticks, where I hold the sticks, where my hands end up on the sticks for different dynamic nuances and what have you. Notice that I'm holding the sticks and I'm controlling the sticks only from my fingertips, all here. This is my method of finger sticking technique, to be able to play this way. If I were playing in a conventional manner, I would be using these fingers here, you see, like this, to play, and also the thumb to control the bounce of the stick. Okay, the same thing is evident here as to how I hold it. Now, if you notice that here, it's very much an American rudimental technique of holding the stick. It's very disciplined, military stick handling grip that always keeps the stick in the same place. And when I want to play with my fingers on the left side, I use these two fingers here, or this finger here. On the right side, I end up using my timpani technique, which only incorporates the tips of my fingers. Okay? And when I use match grip, it's pretty much a classical timpani technique to playing. Okay? And this is how I do it. So everything always comes to the center of the snare drum and always falls the same place all the time. So I have control. What I'm doing is just controlling the stick as to where it will fall and react off the head. That's my main objective, is to be able to bring the stick off the head from the same point of impact every time, as much as I possibly can. And as my average gets better, the sound of the drum becomes more consistent, and I'm more and more in control of how I present my ideas through the snare drum, and therefore spreading that concept to the rest of the drum set, the whole drum set environment as well. In the next up-and-coming little episode, it deals specifically with stick handling, how to hold the sticks, how to play from the right side as well as the left side, and how to utilize fully the coordinative elements that are available to you when you play the drums. You have to first start with the drum in front of me, the snare drum. It is the heart of the drum set. It is pretty much the pivotal point from which all of the patterns that we play pretty much emanate. So I discuss this in the up-and-coming little segment, and I want to make sure that you understand that these musical instruments are very, very important. How you play and the drums have a lot to do with how you hold the drumsticks and how you sit, therefore presenting your ideas through the drums as a medium. Okay, the point of all of that was that if you notice, my hands always change. And this is one of the points that I like to work with in my playing that's very, very important to me. When I was younger, the way that I learned to play the drums was through group participation in marching bands. And in marching bands, we played the conventional way, pretty much this way in the United States. And I found that at that time, as I was playing this way, that I had a lot of difficulty in understanding why, at that time, that you could only play right-handed on the drum. When I went to play the drum set, I felt uncomfortable just playing the drum set from this one position, the conventional way. So I thought, what would happen if I played this way? And then, as I continued to play this way, I started to find myself looking at the idea of playing any way, including this match grip, which is now very, very popular amongst most players. So I started to get involved in playing the drum from very many aspects and utilizing the snare drum as my center to present everything that I play rhythmically on the drums. Well, all my concepts basically start from the snare drum. But it all basically came around from the standpoint of my deciding to play and control my sticking. Now, one of the things that's important about sticking is how you hold the sticks, or how I hold the sticks. For me, it has a tendency to be loose. So I have a problem many times, especially if I'm cold and I'm not warmed up properly. My drumsticks will slip. They will fall out of my hands. And over the years, I've been able to develop an understanding between me and the drumsticks that says, okay, you can't play any more than the muscles will allow you to play at the time, because of course the muscles get very, very tense if they're not loose. The fibers don't have enough air, and so therefore they tighten up when it's cold. As you continue to play and there's movement, they get very flexible. And in the hand, for me, there are different stations of muscles that become very important to me as I perform. When I'm cold, I always depend very much on what I can do with my fingers and my wrists. As I get warmer, for more power, I start to use the larger muscle groups. Now, one has to become in tune to the body and what one's individual body can do, you see. So it's up to the individual to decide what to do with the drumsticks as far as I'm concerned. The main thing, though, is that as I hold the stick, that I know where to place the stick on the drum, how much of my hand I want to be in touch with the stick on a consistent basis, and how the angle in which I play the stick, how that's going to work for me in terms of a tone. Many players play angled down. Many players, because they play the conventional way, will many times use the bead, and the bead will be pointed almost vertically at the snare drum. I tend to want to bring the stick down into the center of the drum as consistently as I can, you know, so that when I'm playing, I'm getting the fullest tone from the snare drum that I can. I'm getting the fullest tone from any drum that I can. But I'm also very much concentrating on what kind of sound I can draw out of the drum as far as my sticks are concerned. How I hold my sticks are very, very important. So therefore, I can play, I can move to a certain area of the drum set and not have to worry about the loss of the stick or anything outside of just the creation of the music. So for me, it's a very important asset to be able to play from the right side as opposed to just to play only from the left side, okay? This brings into view a lot of other things that I do that tend to be considered as unorthodox, or was considered as unorthodox, but of late, within the last few years, I'm beginning to observe that a lot of younger players and also some of my peers are also playing in this way. One of the most important elements in playing the drums is the knowledge of how and when to use the drumsticks. Which sticks to use in certain given situations will affect how you play. Can you imagine if you're playing in a situation with a small trio and the only drumstick you have to use is a big, fat 3S, and you guys know what I'm talking about, parade stick, that just happened to be the only drumsticks in your stick bag? And you're trying to back up Sarah Vaughan or someone like this, she'd kill you. You need to know what to use in certain situations. What's most important is that you take the drumstick that you feel can be effective for you in all given situations before you start to work with specialized sticks. Like say, take this particular stick for instance. What I use is a stick that's of a medium weight, medium density, that I feel I can control for the size of my hand and for the length of my arm, so that my reach is good and I can feel very comfortable playing the drums with it. But let's say it's not a general purpose situation anymore, and I'm not just playing in a big band or in a fusion band where we play a large variety of in terms of types of music. Maybe I might want to go to a stick that's a little bit still in terms of the range of my general purpose stick, but with a different kind of wood. That's important too. Maple has a tendency to have a little bit more air inside, so it gives you the feeling of security if it's a fat kind of stick, but yet it's light. And that's very, very important. Whereas if you go to a stick that's made of oak or something like that, it's a lot stronger. There are problems with that in terms of playing certain kinds of music. You have more weight and density, and it makes you work harder. So therefore, you look for those kind of sticks in a heavy impact situation like rock and roll. And so you learn from your experiences, and it's most important to remember these things. File them away up here, because you never know when you're going to have need of those particular elements when it comes time to play in certain situations. So always be prepared, not just with the drumsticks, but with brushes or whatever else you might use in your kit bag of utensils to apply to the drums and the drum heads. One area for me that has always been my weakest, and I've striven over the years to try to build it up, has been the area of bass drum playing and its control. I've noticed drummers like Buddy Rich, Tony Williams, Louis Bellson, Max Roach, Art Blakey. They all have their way of playing the bass drum. in such a way that they can control at very, very fast speeds. I mean, with tempos like I'd hear Max playing like this way, Buddy Rich, the same thing. Louis Bellson with both bass drums. They had a reason to play the bass drums that way. In his work with Miles Davis and in his most recent work, especially when I worked with Tony about a year ago as opposite him at a club in New York City, in sitting down in the dressing room and listening to him play, I heard the control that he commanded over his bass drum, just in playing very, very fast patterns, yet very controlled patterns. This comes from a combination of how you sit and delegate your power, the amount of energy that you have to that particular area. So you have to know how to control the amount of energy that you have and how to project it through the bass drum. I've striven to check my bass drum pedal, to check the spring action, to check the torque. That's, I mean, how much arc I'm going to have on the beater. All these things are very important to me, and I've also striven to keep my heels down to build the muscle in my shin area so that I could control the amount of the length of the pattern that I'm playing through the bass drum. That's a very, very difficult instrument to play. The pedal, it's such an unorthodox situation that the one thing that you want to do is to work very slowly with all of the patterns, to take each pattern as you would practice with rudiments, with your hands. The same kind of situation where you practice slowly and deliberately to control the whole pattern for a long period of time. Bass drum playing is a highly selective kind of situation for the drummer, because we normally have relegated the bass drum to playing just very simple patterns that maybe spanned over a beat to, on the average, to a beat and a half. But of late, with the incorporation of the multiple bass drum, of 2 or more bass drums sometimes, because I may play 3 sometimes, and we'll get into that some other time, but I am looking to try to get different tonal combinations happening between my bass drums, not so that they're not tuned the same way, one higher than the other in terms of pitch, maybe a little bit deeper in terms of breadth, to project a different character. So in this way, I want to play more patterns than just the boom, 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 to enhance the rest of the drum set. In this way, I practice more the rudimental patterns that I would practice with my hands, thus building a new coordinative dimension, or a stronger coordinative dimension, to the lower frequency area of the drum set. must be looked upon by you, the player of today, based on the fact that there are pedals and in their design that far exceed whatever the players of the past had to work with. So therefore, make the most of it that you can and try to bring your personality out in the playing of the bass drums now. My approach to playing the bass drum has to do with how I center myself, balancing between one bass drum and the other, enough power so that I can project my concept overall with the four-way coordination that's necessary to keep everything moving at once. I find that I always want to, 90% of the time, keep the heels of my feet down and planted on the bass drum pedal to make the foot plate a part of literally of my foot, so that whenever I raise my foot, the foot plate comes up, it never leaves the sole of my feet at any time. And I can control the up and down stroke movement of the bass drum pedals as I play. If I'm not able to consistently do this, what happens is that I start to play very frenetically. I lose control of the amount of power that I have, and therefore lose the actual ability to pace myself throughout throughout my performance. And so I have to really be careful what I do in the way that I set myself up physically to sit down and play the bass drums. From that point, I also have to consider what kind of sound and how to make myself project and how I'm going to hear myself when I'm playing with the band and, of course, with the rest of the drum set. Sound perspective has a lot to do with how and what you play on the bass drums. If you cannot hear yourself properly with the bass drums, the natural tendency is to play less so that you will be effective at least in the way that the music is still going on, that you can maintain a high level of consistency throughout your playing. But once you're in a position where you can actually hear everything that you're doing between the bass drum and the snare drum and the toms and the cymbals and everything, and your whole sound environment is very much in support of you, there are much more things that you can play. And so here are some of the patterns that I like to practice so that I can play and incorporate them into my sound environment when I'm playing the bass drums and I can hear myself properly. At this time, I'd like to discuss my approach to playing the ride cymbal. I like to use the stick in such a way so that I can control the angle of attack to the surface of the cymbal. As in this particular cymbal, I like to be able to play the center and on the bell and at the edge, because they give me three basic tonal characteristics that I like to draw out and utilize depending on the kind of music that I'm playing. All right? So I will angle the stick so that its approach in contact with the cymbal will either give me a lot of brightness or a little bit more depth, depending on how hard I hit the cymbal and come in contact with it. That, to me, is extremely important in how I approach playing the ride cymbal. And this is a concept that I utilize throughout playing with all of the cymbals within the drum set. The next cymbal in the set that I use quite a bit as an alternative to the ride cymbal is the China type swish cymbal. I've utilized it over the years from about 1968 in situations where I felt that I needed a real good solid alternative sound, something a little bit darker, something as a release from the ride cymbal and its constant high-end, high-frequency sounds. And with the China type, if you utilize it properly, it can be your best friend. One of the things that you have to be concerned about, though, is that it's a very, very loud, raucous, sometimes uncontrollable force. And so in the process, you have to make sure that when you play it, that it is being played in the proper position and in the proper time. Now, when I play the China type cymbal in the Mahavishnu Orchestra, it was utilized as a homing force, something that kept everything and everybody on stage together because we played at a very high level of volume. So everyone could hear that cymbal because it's almost like an inverted parabolic dish. You have a tendency to make it, when you play it, it makes the whole room part of it. So with that kind of power, you have to know how to control it. And what I do is that many times I'll play at the very edge of the cymbal, down here, and I get this low tone consistently. And on the other hand, maybe with the shaft of the stick, at this point, I'll play just here to get more top and to have a bit more power and projection. There are many other points of the cymbal where I like to play for effect, and that comes into the inner part of the dish. Here and here and here, and of course inside the bell, where you get a lot of high and top end frequencies. So just a little while, I'll give you a real strong example of how all of these different areas and points of the cymbals, of this particular cymbal, can be utilized when I play on the drum set. Now when I play the crash cymbal, the objective is to draw the sound out of the cymbal for its natural tone, not to leave the stick on too long. Sometimes I like to try to do that for a specific kind of tonal effect, but normally what I just try to do is to hit the cymbal and draw the tone out. Now when I want to, as an alternate ride cymbal, a small semi-ride, I also will play from the underside of the cymbal so that I can get a respite from the ride cymbal that's on my left, or if it's something where I don't want to play with so much aggressiveness musically, I will try to use the underside of the crash cymbal as an alternate ride to just give me a little bit of a musical space in between the tonal characteristics of my ride cymbal and the tonal characteristics of my swish cymbal. And that's what I do with crash cymbals, is to try to make as many different types of uses of that particular instrument as I possibly can. Okay. The last but not least, and probably most important part of the cymbal setup, or at least as much in importance as the ride cymbal, is of course the hi-hat. And if you notice, the hi-hat gives me very many options, at least double that, in terms of what I can do with my foot on the pedal and what can be done, of course, in concert with the stick application to the top cymbal and sometimes even the bottom cymbal. In my case, of course, being a little bit strange, I also have another cymbal on top that's inverted. It's a small splash, and it adds another characteristic and tone that can sometimes be used directly or in sympathy to the other two cymbals. Now, as I look to perform on these cymbals and apply myself, of course, with my left foot, since it's off to this side, I play with the stick and apply it in this particular manner. I feel that with the hi-hat set up in the way that it is set up for me, as opposed to the conventional right-handed player, I have greater access to the drums and all of the other instruments in this region. So therefore, the reason for it being as low as it is. So now I will attempt to play some patterns that incorporate not only the hi-hat, but all the other cymbals so that you can get a good idea of how I apply my general concept to the cymbals in support of the drum set. That was to show the patterns that I play mostly in my solos and the patterns that I really rely on when I play within the band. They lead into everything and lead out of everything that I do. Also, I try my best to use those patterns from the right-hand side of the set as well as the left-hand side of the set. I try to play from an ambidextrous concept and foundation as much as I possibly can, which means that I play as many of my patterns that I can from the right-hand side as well as from the left-hand side. I use all grips, match grip, and conventional, and with this, it's really very easy then to formulate a lot of different patterns off of the basic structural patterns and rudiments that I have learned. The ones that you've heard and that you can identify are primarily the rolls, all lengths, 5s and 7s and 9s and 11s and 17s, whatever, and paradiddles, triplets, radamancues, flams, grace notes, roughs. Those are the basic fundamental patterns of any good player, and I feel that if used from both sides of the body, you get twice as much effect as you normally would if you just play from one side, as I think the majority of us really do. That's what I think. Another important factor in the playing of the drum set is understanding the use of the microphones that are available. There are many, and it's up to the individual to decide which microphones are best for him or her. But where I'm concerned, I like dynamic mics generally. I like to use pretty much supercardioid and cardioid mics. They have a warmth depending on the kind of instrument that I'm playing, the particular instrument that I'm playing, and the response is very good. The frequency response is very good, and the range is very good. So that's my personal taste. I believe that you should experiment. You should look for the microphones that are working well for you as per the situation in which you play in. Because every situation acoustically will affect the microphones or your sound and the way you hear in a different way than me. So this is most important, okay? Now, in this video, you will notice how the microphones are placed, where they're placed in the drum set. There are two different ways to work. Some people like to use microphones that are placed between the toms. And this tends to be a much more ambient kind of sound. When I have a choice, though, for me, I like to have my microphones set up so that they are close mic to each tom-tom to cut down on the phasing problems that will result to some degree. And so that I can get as much of the signal of that drum as possible. Sometimes this means that I'll also have to use other devices to control when the drum signal goes through the mic. Call and response. This is a method of playing and performing that is inherent between all of the people in the band. By call and response, I mean that I will play a pattern, and it will trigger a pattern that is in response to the pattern that I played from, say, let's say the bass player. Now, in this particular segment, you'll notice that I'm working with the bassist, Enzo Pietropoli. And we, for your knowledge, had not played together for quite a while, maybe for the last 2 years. And I purposely called Enzo because I knew that he had the ability to perform in such a situation where we just played what we felt. And all we needed to do was to perform and to listen to each other so that we could respond to each other's musical signals. Now, as you watched the up-and-coming segment, you will notice that we listen to each other, we play with dynamics so that we can hear each other. We never play and express ourselves as if we were speaking in language of monotone signals. In other words, da 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 in this particular way. We have our ups and downs. We perform in the same way that we would speak a conversation to our best friend. So sometimes we speak softly, sometimes we speak loudly, sometimes we speak together almost as if we are in the crowd and everyone is speaking and there is a multitude of different sounds and signals and frequencies going on at once. But all of this, it is designed in a certain way so that we can project our ideas and play off of each other. And this today is something that's most important in the way that we play. Within the band, everyone in the band has to listen to each other. Everyone has to react to the signals that are presented from all of the instruments that are coming and the information that's coming through the band. If this is done properly, then it means that the band can work together as a team and we can find many, many ways to express ourselves as an organized entity in projecting the music that we want everyone to listen to.
Thank you.